I was only 6 when my father disappeared during a fishing trip off the Maine coast. The Coast Guard said he'd likely gone overboard, tangled in his own nets. For decades, I believed them, until last week, when a storm unearthed something on the beach that made me question everything. His old net, matted with dry blood and fish scales, had been cut, cleanly, by a blade. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment below. I'd love to know if you've ever uncovered a truth you weren't ready to face. The morning I drove back to Bar Harbor, the air smelled the same as it did the day my father disappeared. Salt and pine, sharp enough to sting the back of your throat. I hadn't been back in years. My mother passed away last spring, and I'd been dragging my feet about selling her house. But when the realtor called, saying the roof was sagging and the insurance might not cover it, I knew I had to face the past one last time. The town hadn't changed much. The lobster shack still leaned crooked along the docks, and the same weathered wooden signs pointed toward the harbor. But the people, those who remembered, looked at me with the kind of sympathy that makes you want to vanish into your coat. Everyone here knew about my father, George Cole. He'd gone missing in October of 1977. His boat, the Meredith Dawn, was found drifting a few miles off the coast with the engine still running. His nets were gone. So was he. For almost 50 years, that was the end of it. No body, no answers, just a story that the sea took him. My mother accepted that line, maybe because she had to raise me alone. But for me, that sentence always felt unfinished. When I pulled up to the old house, I found a voicemail waiting on my phone. It was from Jack Turner, one of my father's old fishing buddies. I hadn't spoken to him in decades. His voice was gravelly, but urgent. "Evelyn, it's Jack. You should come down to Gull Point. After last night's storm, something washed up. You'll want to see it." I almost didn't go, but curiosity, or maybe guilt, got the better of me. The beach was deserted when I arrived, the tide still high and the waves rolling in heavy from the storm. Jack stood near the rocks, his hood pulled tight against the wind. He nodded towards something tangled in seaweed. It was a fishing net, what was left of one. Frayed, crusted with barnacles, and in the center, a patch of dark red that had seeped deep into the rope fibers. Jack crouched down beside it. Recognized the pattern? I knelt closer. Even after all these years, I knew that nodding style. My father had taught it to me on the porch, his big hands guiding mine through loops of twine. I swallowed hard. "That's his net," Jack sighed. "Storm must have ripped it out of the rocks, but look here." He pointed to the edge of the mesh. Some of the strands had been sliced through, not frayed by salt or torn by waves, but clean, straight cuts, the kind a sharp knife would make. A chill ran through me. "You think someone cut him free?" Jack hesitated. "Or maybe cut him loose." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked with wind and memories. My father's things were still in the attic, his compass, his oilskin coat, his old logbook. I took the logbook downstairs, flipped through brittle pages, and stopped at the last entry dated October 11th, 1977. "Tide's turning strange. Can't trust the weather or the company I keep." The handwriting wobbled at the end, like he'd been riding on a rocking boat. I stared at that line for a long time. The company I keep. Was he talking about his crew? Jack? Someone else? The next morning, I decided to find out. Bar Harbor's harbormaster's office looked almost identical to how I remembered it. Same rusted coffee pot, same corkboard layered with permits and lost dog flyers. Behind the desk sat Earl Whitman, a man I vaguely recognized from childhood. He'd been an assistant back then, now he was in charge. "Earl," I said, introducing myself. "I'm George Cole's daughter. I was wondering if there's any record from his disappearance. Logs, reports, anything?" He squinted. "That was a long time ago, Evelyn. Most of that stuff's boxed up in storage, but you can take a look." He led me to a back room filled with metal filing cabinets. Dust hung in the air. I spent hours flipping through folders, my fingers going numb from the cold. Then at the bottom of a box labeled Maritime Incidents 1977, I found something, a weathered envelope marked Coal Investigation. Inside were copies of Coast Guard statements and a single black and white photo of the Meredith Dawn floating empty on calm water. One report caught my attention. Recovered rope fragments show signs of severing inconsistent with natural wear. But in the margin, someone had written in pen, "Possible equipment failure, case closed." It didn't sit right. I asked Earl who'd been assigned to the investigation. He frowned. That would have been Officer Harold Boone, retired ages ago. Lives up by Bass Hill, I think. So I drove there. The road wound through bare trees and fog until I reached a sagging house with wind chimes made of shells. Boone answered the door, older than I expected but sharp-eyed. He listened quietly as I explained who I was and what I'd found. Then he sighed. Your father's case was complicated. People were scared to talk. Scared of what? I asked. Poaching, he said flatly. Back then, there was a lot of under-the-table fishing going on. Your dad had a reputation for being honest. That didn't make him popular. He led me to his shed, where he kept old case files. I shouldn't be showing you this, he muttered, pulling out a folder yellowed with age. Inside was a hand-drawn map marking the area where the Meredith Dawn was found, alongside 2 other boats that had been fishing nearby that night. The Lorna May and the Griffin's Wake. Boone tapped one name written beside the Lorna May. That's who your father had problems with. Ray Barlow, hot-headed guy, claimed your father was stealing his lines. I felt my stomach tighten. I remembered the name. Barlow had come to my father's funeral service, standing apart from everyone, not saying a word. Boone closed the folder. Your father filed a complaint against Barlow 2 days before he disappeared. Said Barlow threatened him with a knife at the dock. That was the first time anyone had ever told me that. Over the next few days, I tracked down Ray Barlow's son, Tommy. He ran a bait shop by the pier now, weathered and gray like the sea itself. When I walked in and introduced myself, he froze mid-sentence. You're George Cole's girl. I just want to understand what happened, I said softly. Not to accuse anyone, just to know. He hesitated, then motioned me behind the counter. My father talked about that night before he died, said he regretted what happened. I didn't understand back then. What did he say? That there was a fight out at sea. He and George argued over fishing lines like always, but it got bad this time. My dad said your father fell overboard during the struggle. I frowned. Fell or was pushed? Tommy looked away. He said he tried to pull him back up. The net got tangled. He panicked, cut it loose, and he told himself it was mercy. I felt dizzy. The sound of waves outside pounded in my ears. Why didn't he tell anyone? He did, sort of. He told the harbor master, but they called it an accident. No one wanted trouble. Everyone was poaching back then, Evelyn. Admitting the truth would have sunk half the harbor. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old water-stained notebook. He made me promise to keep this after he died. Maybe it belongs to you. Inside were journal entries from 1977. Ray Barlow's handwriting, neat and slanted. The final entry was short. Can't sleep. See his face every night. The sea keeps what we take. That night, I sat in my mother's old kitchen with the diary open beside me, the storm howling outside like it did all those years ago. I reread the lines over and over. My father hadn't been taken by the sea. He'd been cut loose by another man, one who couldn't face his own guilt. The next morning, I drove down to Gull Point where Jack had found the net. The tide was low and the rocks glistened with morning mist. I laid the net out flat, cleaned now of seaweed and debris. I traced the cuts with my fingers, each one deliberate, each one a choice. For so long I'd imagined my father drowning alone, helpless. But now I saw it differently. He'd fought. He'd been strong, defiant even at the end. That gave me a strange kind of peace. Jack met me there, bringing his thermos of coffee like always. I told him everything about Barlow, the diary, the confession. He didn't say much, just nodded and looked out over the gray water. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do with it?" I folded the net carefully, then carried it to the edge of the dock. The water lapped softly against the posts. I thought about all the years of silence, of pretending not to wonder. And then I let the net go. It drifted out, slowly sinking beneath the surface, back to where it belonged. As it disappeared, I whispered, "You can rest now, Dad." For the first time in nearly 5 decades, the harbor felt quiet, not empty, but still, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. Maybe we never really lose people to the sea. Maybe they just wait there until we're brave enough to bring the truth back to shore. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Subscribe if you believe every truth eventually surfaces.